course, the founder, John Baptist de La Salle, is featured in the center of the mural, which, by the way, was completed in 1981 for the 300th anniversary of the founding of the Institute of the Brothers of the Christian Schools. And you'll notice how much larger he is. That's a very common way in which, throughout Christian art, a saint has been presented as kind of larger and above others, and in this case surrounded by four brothers who have either been beatified or canonized as saints as well. When you think of somebody central surrounded by saints, in traditional Christian iconography, you think of Christ surrounded by the four evangelists, right? And there's Christ right above the founder, holding the instruments of the Eucharist, the bread and the wine, and identified. And then on either side, on both sides of Christ, we have portraits of the four evangelists: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The other part of the context is looking out towards the chapel itself. It's really quite a wonderful window. It's beautifully done, very much in the tradition of medieval stained glass, but also thematically it has this wonderful connection with the mural, because John Baptist de La Salle's, of course, emphasis was on serving children, and so the Christ child with Mary and Joseph are reminders of what it is indeed that the founder was focusing on. The last part that I want to mention in terms of the context is the actual architecture of the chapel itself. This chapel was dedicated in 1928 by Cardinal Hayes. That it's not just the early American style, which is what you see much more on the outside, but the interior is really in the style of architecture that goes back to the life of John Baptist de La Salle. It is what is called by architectural historians a classical French Baroque style. So it's actually the style that would have been sort of cutting edge when de La Salle was growing up and living in France at the end of the 17th, early 18th century. That Baroque style, it's the style that follows the Renaissance, is represented by the broken pediments. You see how the line that has a dental molding that's sticking out, the use of the Ionic capitals, these kind of roll-like capitals at the top of the columns, the barrel vault ceiling with the decoration, also very common from that period of architecture. It's not as emotive as the Baroque style that you see, for instance, in Spain and Italy at the time, which is associated with Jesuit churches. But if you went to some of the really wonderful Jesuit churches in Rome, you would see that the columns might be twisted, for example. Instead of being a smooth column, they would have twisted columns. They're just more theatrical. There's more agitation, it's more dynamic. This is more, I would describe as contemplative. So when we come back to the mural again, we see de La Salle with his back, interestingly enough, to the great architectural masterpiece of the town, the city he grew up in, which is Reims in France. It's in the background for him, but he's looking to the future, and I think it's very important that he looks out at us. He looks through a 17th century style building to us in the audience living here in the 21st century. So there's a kind of unifying effect to the iconography. Okay? The four brothers who surround him, of course, are considerably larger than the brothers who are in the foreground, who are lower. And I think most of you know that those who are in the foreground are intended to represent brothers here at Manhattan College. Brother Benilde was canonized in 1967, and he holds a book because for 40 years he taught in elementary schools in rural France. And I think it's just wonderful that somebody is canonized as a saint for being a teacher. I mean, just being a teacher. One of the things that we know about him is that he must have been a great role model, because 200 more than 200 of his students became brothers. To the left of De La Salle, and therefore over his right shoulder, is Saint Mutien Marie of Belgium, who was canonized in 1989. And again, a teacher. He taught for 58 years, and I think it's interesting. He taught music and art. Areas that we want to make even stronger at Manhattan College. There are those who had more tragic ends, and again on the right side of De La Salle, or over his left shoulder, touching his heart, is Blessed Brother Solomon, who was the first brother to be martyred. Okay, and even though the Christian Brothers are a French institution, they've had a kind of love-hate relationship with the French government. And during the French Revolution, the brothers actually lost their legal status, and some, sort of went along with the revolutionary government, but others stood for their beliefs against it. And he was arrested in 1792 and was executed, as were many who stood for their beliefs. Miguel is, of course, to the left of St. John Baptist de La Salle, and again has his hand up. He is a patron saint of Ecuador for a whole country, and one of the first Latin Americans to be canonized by the Catholic Church. He was a student of linguistics, and he emphasized the importance of continuing Castilian Spanish, basically, in South America. Okay. He was in France in 1904 when there was another one of these crises between the French government and the brothers. They were expelled from France, and he went to Spain. And one of what he did over the next few years was translate a lot of the original works of De La Salle into Spanish, so that Spanish brothers would be able, who didn't read French, would be able to read them. That turns out to be a really major accomplishment, not only because there are a lot of works, but also because the brothers have really been very successful in Spanish-speaking countries. Flanked by the cupola of the building that we're in, the chapel, which points, I think, interestingly enough, up to heaven, towards the cathedral and up to heaven on the one side, and then by one of the arches you see over here on the right, where De La Salle has his left hand out as if he's presenting the brothers. You'll see one of the arches are the brothers that represent the brothers here at Manhattan College. And that arch, I think, is interesting. At least I like to think of it as, the representation of the alma mater, your home when you're being educated. And it's interesting that that's below the really interesting home of De La Salle in Rams as well. So we've talked about the cathedral, but to the right of the cathedral is a representation of De La Salle's ancestral home. Three brothers particularly who are somewhat larger and certainly more in the forefront or foreground of the painting below that have been identified. And the first one is to the left. You see he's closer up, and that's Brother Charles Henry Budemer, who graduated from Manhattan in 1933, and again, may I say, was a great medieval theologian. Did his Ph.D. Working in medieval theology from Catholic University. He served as his dean at De La Salle College, but what he's best known for is being the first American to be elected as a superior general of the brothers. And he served during the time of Second Vatican Council, when there were disagreements within the order as well as within the church at large about the best way to deal with modernity and move forward. And he was noted for reconciling different points of view and being a real peacemaker. Now, all of us who are at Manhattan know about Brother Jasper. He was at Manhattan for 44 years, and even though he was a prefect of discipline, he was loved. And it's not a job that most people necessarily want to have, but people felt that he was fair and that he cared about the students, and that was what his reputation was from. And of course, that he was also the founder of our athletic programs, as well as many other programs, literary societies and things like that. And probably you've heard about the story of the seventh inning stretch. To his to our right as we look at him, a little shorter, smiling out at us, and that's Brother Amandus Leo Hall. That's the person that Leo Hall is named for, and is really noted for establishing that school as one of the best here at Manhattan, and giving it the strong reputation that engineering has.